Good evening, everybody. Sorry for a little bit late. There's a storm in Ireland, I believe. There's a storm. So we got a little bit delayed. We got cut off. But my guest today is with me. I came across this, my guest tonight, from my last interview with Chris Marquardt, that was a couple of weeks ago because I was away on business last week. And it's Trevor Cole. So, Trevor, so pleased. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
That's great. I tell you, Chris told me that you were his favorite photographer at this moment in time, which is, there's obviously our attitudes and styles change, but I thought I've just got to check this guy out. And when I looked at it, I saw the first photograph on your 500px, which we're going to show later on, of the iceberg there, taken in Iceland, I believe that was it?
Absolutely, yeah.
I was just bowled away, and I thought, well, I'm not a landscape photographer. My interest is street photography. I thought, well, let's try and diversify the program a little bit more and get a landscape photographer on. So great to have you on. Want to learn a lot about landscape photography and that sort of stuff. Let's just get a geographical start, as I like to do first off, Trevor. Whereabouts are you based?
Well, I'm in a small village called Dunfanaghy on the north coast of Donegal, which is northwest Ireland. A beautiful little spot and an ideal place for a photographer to be. Yeah.
From what the images that I've seen of that area, it's just an amazing place. Have you always lived in Ireland? I don't detect an Irish accent there.
Well, it's quite strange you should say this. I was born in the city of Derry,
right,
quite a long time ago. And I went into teaching and left immediately after university to live in England for a while. And being a geographer originally, I decided that perhaps I should see the rest of the world, and took my teaching profession as a geographer to places international and stayed overseas for 24 years.
Wow.
Until recently.
Whereabouts were you traveling around then?
Well, I lived for 13 years in Singapore.
Right.
Then I lived for a short time in West Africa. Following that, Italy. Then in Ethiopia for 4 years. And until 3 years ago, I moved to Brazil.
Right, crikey, that's a fair old bit of travelling there, and by the sound of things, teaching geography in all these different countries, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and I loved it. I believe in doing everything with a passion.
Yeah,
I often refer to myself as a geographer photographer.
Mm. That's fantastic. All that journey time. So let's go back basically right at the beginning. What's your first recollections of a camera?
That's a very good question, and you've stretched my memory a little bit, but I can answer it. I had, for the very first camera, a small Kodak Instamatic.
Amazing how many people that is their first camera. It is truly amazing. That was my first camera. and Chris Marquardt's first camera, as it turns out. It's quite amazing.
That's quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
But as soon as I realized that I enjoyed being out and about and traveling, my father worked for the DuPont company. So from a fairly early age, I got to travel a little bit.
Right.
I persuaded them to buy me a real camera. And so they did. And
what was that first real camera then?
Well, it was actually quite an unusual one. It was an SLR, and it was a Rolleiflex.
A Rolleiflex?
A Rolleiflex SLR.
Rolleiflex. Sorry, you cut out there. I thought you said Rolleiflex. SLR Rolleiflex, not a twin lens reflex.
No, it was an unusual one, and I think it's probably a collectible today.
Yeah, it would be. My first SLR was the Zenit E brick, as I would call it, with a 55mm lens, and it was one of those lenses where you had to literally close the aperture down. It wasn't automatic aperture, so you set the aperture, check your meter reading, close the aperture down, and then take your photograph. And the amount of times I forgot to close that aperture down was innumerable times, and so many shots were lost because of it. So
Well,
that's interesting. So the Rolleiflex, tell us about the Rolleiflex SLR, because this is a new one to me.
Yeah, it was fairly similar actually. Everything was manual, but what a good way to learn.
Yeah.
And I went on a trip in, I think it was way back in the late 70s, and I took it with me, and I learned on the go, so to speak.
What was your preferred film?
Well, I almost always took slide film.
Okay.
And in my latter days of using analog systems, I used Fuji Velvia to a great extent.
Fuji seems to be the one which a lot of people. I had this same conversation with Chris actually. Fuji seemed to be the favorite for the landscape photographers. I was a Kodachrome user myself, 64 Kodachrome. Why I don't know, but mainly I think the Kodachrome suited the portrait type style photographer rather than the landscapers, who all seem to emanate from the Fujifilm.
I think I tried Kodachrome 64, and I was never totally satisfied with the vibrancy of the colors.
Yeah,
I think the landscape photographer in me at the time preferred a little bit more intensity.
Yeah, I think, and also the Fujifilm, as I said to Chris last time, and to others, it has a tendency, is a little bit of a bias towards the green.
True, yeah. Absolutely true.
So it enhances your landscape photography there. So from the Rolleiflex, we're really stuck into gear now at the moment, but from the Rolleiflex, which was the next camera that you moved into?
I then went down the Minolta road, and I had a Minolta 7000, I think it was.
Is this the one where they used to put the disc in the side, and it used to help you sort of put some filtration in the camera?
No, it was just straightforward, put in your film and take your roll. And I had that up until about 1990.
Right.
And then I switched to Nikon, and I bought an F90X.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm a ex Nikon user myself, so I'm quite familiar with the Nikon range. My first Nikon was the Nikon EM, and then I went through the FM and FM2 and FE2, that sort of area. Then switched to the autofocus. Oh, fantastic! Why I got rid of the FM2, I shall never ever know. I keep on saying it. It's one of my big regrets getting rid of that camera. It was an absolute workhorse and a superb camera to use.
No, they are.
Your road now. Meanwhile, obviously, we got this. When did photography really start for you, then, Trevor?
I would say, honestly, it started the day I was given that Rolleiflex, and I'm not sure whether travel inspired me to photograph or whether photography inspired me to travel, but certainly it was my passion for seeing the rest of the world that promoted this instinct within me to get the camera out and capture those moments. And it's a story of my life, really.
Yeah. And would you say that it was the main reason for you taking geography as a degree and becoming a teacher in geography?
Well, to be honest, I've always been very passionate about geography. And that was partly down to the fact that I had a very inspiring teacher at school.
Yeah.
And it's always the teacher that makes the difference. But I think also living in Ireland and traveling a little bit really triggered off those early academic interests.
Yeah.
And the camera seemed to, be synonymous with being a geographer.
Camera was obviously always with you when you were studying through university, I take it.
Absolutely. But especially when I went anywhere outside of the home base. Sometimes you don't see your own home as a beautiful place, which it is, until you actually go somewhere else and look back. And I've probably taken more photographs in Ireland since being overseas and then appreciating the beauty of my home country.
We're going to obviously go to screen share later on and have a look at your quite, in my opinion, fantastic work. Has it always been landscape photography for you, or have you sort of taken an interest in street photography? I know you do some superb portraiture work, but has the idea of just gently walking around streets been an attraction to you?
I have to say, you know, yes, I do take a lot of landscapes, but I love street photography. And I really love, especially somewhere like the African continent, I truly love stopping and asking people if I can take a photograph, or just capturing a street scene which is reflective of the local culture of an area.
Yeah, it's a strange thing I find when you're walking around the streets and you're taking photographs of just normal activity, but when you actually, I've just come back from Munich on a short trip out there, and I've just been going through some images recently, and it's those very short memories that come back. Oh, I remember that little scene that you took there, and isn't that strange behavior? And then sometimes there's something in the image which you didn't even see you were taking, which adds that little bit of difference to the image.
I agree totally. Sometimes you take the shot and you don't really know you've got the shot until you look afterwards, or perhaps you haven't got the shot, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's always that time, isn't there?
Absolutely.
That happens to us all. So when did you switch, or I'm assuming you switched to digital, so when was the big switch?
The big switch was actually when I went to live in Ethiopia. I had traveled in Ethiopia in the year 2000, and then an opportunity came up to teach in one of the big international schools. And I just decided that 2006 was a good time to make that change. And so I did. And I bought myself a Nikon D200.
Yeah, that was the last Nikon that I had, actually, and that was an incredible camera.
Very, very.
It was just a superb workhorse, really. For street photography, though, it wasn't the ideal camera to have. I wanted something smaller, which is one of the reasons why I switched out of Nikon to the Fujis. I did. At one period, I did try the Nikon 1 series camera just for sort of street photography, but that was just a little bit too small. That had gone the wrong way for me, so to speak. So the Nikon D200, and what lenses basically did you purchase with that?
Well, this is a good question. I had, let me think about this. I know I had a 70-300. I had an 18-200, which was a lens I used a lot. I had a 20mm prime lens and a 50mm prime lens. I think at that stage, that was probably about it. Yeah.
And has your equipment expanded since then?
Massively.
So
yes.
I could safely say you're not a one camera, one lens man. Then you've got a
no,
a little bit more than that. I'll tell you what. At this stage, let's go straight to the screen share, Trevor.
Okay.
And we'll look at your beautiful work on 500px. You should be seeing this now.
Okay.
Can you see that now? Can you see that now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just saying this for those that will be watching this at a later date when it's posted onto iTunes. We're just going through some images here, and this is when really you should be watching it on YouTube to look at this fantastic imagery which Trevor's got here. I've got to make sure that I'm on the right page myself. Here we go. So I'm sorted here. The Somali girl.
Yeah,
This, when I saw, look, God, I just can't believe the clarity here. Look at those eyes.
and that was truly a street shot,
Was it really?
a spontaneous shot where the girl looked around, and I just ran off 4 or 5 shots.
Yeah.
And there was a dark background, which is one of my favorite ways of taking a portrait, where I spot meter or center weight the metering, so that there's a huge contrast between her and this darker background. But her eyes, I love the human eye.
It's a saying which is said sometimes, all too often, you could swim in those eyes.
Oh, it's
unbelievable.
Incredible.
I'm just scrolling down here because I wanted to see the EXIF data, which is always very interesting. Interesting enough, you're still using the oh no, it's a D800 now. Fair enough. Okay. And because when I first saw the image without looking at that EXIF data, I thought you'd probably selected taken this with a flash and probably put the shutter speed up 1/25th or 2/50th, and then really rack the aperture to about f11 or f15, 16 or something of that nature to get that black background. But this was not the case. It's there's no flash fired here at all, is there?
No, and I don't use a flash.
You don't use flash at all? Interesting.
Very, very, very rarely. I love natural light.
Yeah.
I love the contrasts that are created by natural light.
Yeah. That's a superb image. It is. When I first saw it, I thought, well, if you're going to put one image on the front page of a portfolio or of a website, that's got to be it. That's amazing.
And it's one of my most recent images when I took it in December.
December, that's right. Down here you can see December 3rd, 2014. Uploaded 5 days ago. Brilliant. Let's go to the next image. Blue Lagoon.
The Blue Lagoon. Taken in Iceland. An amazing, amazing location. It's unique anywhere in the world. And it's basically a proglacial lake, and the geography teacher speaking now, where a glacier carves the bergs into this amazing lake, and then the icebergs float down the lagoon and into the sea, where they get washed up on a beach. And that's where some of the other images are taken, with the action of waves and the swash and backwash carrying in and out the bergs on the beach, creating these wonderful lines and patterns. But this lagoon that you're looking at is the place where that all starts.
Yeah, I think this is a lesson in landscape photography here. In my naivety of landscape photography, very high horizon here, not dead center. Some people, the beginners, probably fall into that trap. Although there's nothing wrong with that.
I tend to
got lead in here, which is great. This cloud and this super.
I tend to break the rules now and again.
Yeah.
And not adhere to the rule of thirds, but most of the time it is a good idea to use it. Yeah.
Most of the time, yeah. There's always the time where you got to go with the rule. This is the image which I first saw, and actually after talking to Chris, and he mentioned your name, and I thought, let's go and do it, and I saw this. It's not really what I would term as an iceberg, is it? It's more like an ice piece.
An ice pyramid. They almost look like sculptures in the lagoon. And this is what makes it truly, truly special.
Yeah. Can I just ask you here, because I'm going to flick to the next one, which is it's a little bit mono-ish, heavy on this here. Go back. How much work have you done on this photograph here? Is this? I know Iceland is is a very intriguing place for the light. Is this natural light, or have you done some processing on this image?
Very, very, very little.
Right.
To be
Okay.
honest. It was at the end of the day, so there was a little bit of a hint of light coming from the setting sun.
Yeah.
Which didn't actually set as a classical sunset, but nonetheless the clouds refract some of this light, and the filter may have enhanced that a little bit.
Yeah.
Was
that an ND filter you had on there?
Yes, a neutral density filter, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I put that on not just to enhance the light, I put it on to slow down the movement of the waves, the wave action, so that there are these lines radiating outwards.
Yeah.
On the beach.
Yeah, and you're catching that ice particle in the middle there. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Using a 24mm lens there. The previous image was a 14mm, because am I right here? Nah, that was a 200mm. Okay, I was wondering whether your style is probably becoming more of a prime lens user than the zooms which you originally bought when you've got the D200.
Well, I'm going to say that both those lenses were zoom lenses.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, right. I'm with you. It's where the EXIF data has registered.
Yeah. So it was f2.8 70 to 200 and f2.8 14 to 24. Both
with you, yeah.
superb lenses.
Yeah. So another image there, mono. I'm going to skip on a little bit more because what I want to try and do is get. That's interesting.
I think personally, I just love this. I have a passion for wrecks.
Yeah.
Wrecks, and this was a United States. I think it was Marine Corps Dakota.
Yeah.
Probably correct me on this, but it crashed there in 1973 on the coast of Iceland. And as far as I know, I think everyone survived, but the relic lies on the beach to this day. And there was snow on the ground, and the clouds were just so dark and foreboding, it was irresistible to photograph.
And taken quite recently by looks of things, March the 8th, 2015. So you've literally, a couple of weeks ago, just got back from Iceland.
Absolutely, yeah, just over 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Fantastic place. I love going there.
Everyone that I've spoken to is into landscape photography that has visited Iceland has said it is a place where they just have got to go back again and explore the island more than the opportunities that they did. I've never heard a bad word about the island at all, whether it's a case of the photography opportunities or whether the people. It's just a fantastic place to visit.
It's an absolutely stunning island. As a geographer, it's one of these places where the Earth is still in formation. Yeah. And the photographer, his challenge or her challenge is to capture that.
Yeah. We're looking now at an Ethiopian man from, is that Tigray? Do you pronounce it that way? Or Tigray? Tigray.
Northern Ethiopia, from a little village that I know quite well, because I've often stayed in a lodge very close by to this.
Yeah.
This guy, I just thought he was out in the street market.
Mm-hmm.
He has a Coptic cross tattooed in his forehead.
Yeah.
But he had just an amazing facial structure.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
And he had a stick in his mouth, which is actually his toothbrush. He cleans his teeth with. They fray the ends of a stick and they clean their teeth. Very effective.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next portrait there, which I can see. I just love the light and the shadow on this. This is superb, the way that it's caught his right-hand side, our left as we look at it. and then the right-hand side of his face is just in a little bit of shadow, a little bit of detail. Superb capture.
Well, thank you. I mean, I do love taking my portraits, and as I said to you earlier, the light that comes through in someone's eyes is, for me, the essence of any portrait.
I'm very interested, actually. Just again, I'm studying the EXIF data here. This is taken with a D750, ISO set at 1600. Now that is just, you know, I must be honest, I'm pleased with my 1600, 3200 ISO settings on my Fuji, but this is fantastic, isn't it?
It is. This is one of Nikon's latest cameras, actually, 24 megapixel.
Yeah.
But now you can really, really take photographs in fairly dark places.
Yeah.
Get away with fairly minimal noise.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes photography a real pleasure.
Yeah. I think if you can possibly take yourself away from this area here of the face, if you look up in this area here where the out of focus wall is, and you have got a lovely film grain effect there of the wall, which is very nicely depicted using this camera. Let's go to the
go on.
Beautiful. I was just going to say this Harari smile. It's a lovely image here. Look at the bokeh on that. It's absolutely out of focus. I bet, what's that, at 2.8, something like that? Yeah, 2.8.
Well, I tend to try and take all of my portraits at f2.8 just to get that wonderful blurring in the background and make the face just
pop,
stand out. I mean, you know, the background. If you were a bit of an artist, you might think, well, it's quite hard to see what's behind there, but there are actually people and stalls, just a blur of color. But she just had the most amazing smile.
Yeah, she has, hasn't she?
Incredible. It is actually an incredible country. It's a photographer's paradise, Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And in a very, very safe place.
I was going to ask you about that later. We'll hold that thought for later when we finish the screen share, because obviously a Muslim country. Did you have any problems taking photographs of these of the ladies, especially when you're in Ethiopia?
Well, it's funny.
Is it a Muslim country?
It's got a larger Christian majority.
Oh, right, okay.
And it's got a Muslim minority.
You're right, okay.
Generally speaking, it's easy to take photographs. But in some of the Muslim areas, the men are happy to have their photographs taken, but the women less so.
Yeah, sure.
But I love the challenge of interacting and asking people if they'd like to have their photograph taken.
And what about the language situation? Are you you say you're in Ethiopia for what, 3, was it, or 4 years?
4 years. I spoke enough or speak enough to know a few words that, if you like, break the ice and, you know, have a little bit of humor with them.
That's good.
A very simple level.
Yeah.
Which makes a difference.
Of course it does. That's the opportunity to break the ice with being able to talk the language. There's no doubt about that.
Well, especially with portrait or street photography, you know, because although we had a guide with this, I always take a guide because I feel it's good to have someone that really knows where they're going, even if I know the place well. I like off the beaten track locations because you're going to get something that other people don't.
Yeah.
So, but generally, you know, I'm very familiar with Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And as such, it is one of my top travel destinations.
And I want to talk to you about Ethiopia a little bit more later on because it's somewhere where you've just did you go on the visit with Chris Marquardt to Ethiopia to have a bit of a racket around, or are you planning to do that?
No, I organised that. In
Oh,
fact,
okay, great, right.
after meeting Chris in Iceland,
Yeah.
I just happened to show him a few of my images,
Mm.
and that's where it all started from.
Yeah, yeah.
So I took him along, and he loved it.
Yes, he did. He did indeed. He's speaking volumes about it when we were talking a couple of weeks ago. Going to finish on this one. This one is almost the Afghan girl, isn't it? But it was taken in. It's an Irish girl.
It's an Irish girl.
An Irish guy's a smiling. It's absolutely fantastic.
In my own village.
Really? Look at those eyes.
Her eyes, and you have to believe me here whenever I say, people say, what have you done?
Yep.
I've actually done nothing except, a little bit of editing here and there.
Sure.
Her eyes, if you saw her on the street now, you would have to stop and take a second look. Her eyes are incredible.
They're like marbles, aren't they?
They are, but the colors, I mean,
Yeah.
she's got at least three different colors which blend into each other, which are absolutely superb.
I'm going to come out of this for a second because there's a couple of questions I want to ask you.
No, that's fine.
Something with regards to your portraiture, and it's something which I've seen there on every single image. The glassiness that you get with the eye. How have you achieved that?
Well, I try. I mean, I take a lot of portraits, so
Sure.
that shot will have been one of maybe 20 or 30 photographs. But I'm one of these people that seeks the light.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great quote out there somewhere. I'm sure I'm going to quote it incorrectly. But in the right light at the right time, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. And I think if you can catch someone's eyes in the light, then you're already halfway there. Mm-hmm. Now, when I edit the photographs, I may do a tiny little bit of dodging and a tiny little bit of sharpening, but I try to keep it to a minimum.
Yeah.
I don't like overdoing it. And her eyes really are as you see them.
It's amazing that I just spotted that from not only the photographs of the ladies, including the little girl, but obviously of the men as well. That glassy view, that it's sharpness in the eyes. That's obviously the point of focus when you're taking a portrait that you're using. Is that right? You're focusing on the eye itself?
Well, when I'm running my little photo courses, it's the one little tip I give everybody is the portrait will not really have any meaning if the eye, at least one of the eyes, it isn't in focus. And I think a sharp eye or sharp eyes make all the difference because they're looking at you or they're looking at something. Yeah. And you want to see them in focus.
The other question I was going to ask you with regards to the street side of things there, that portrait side of things you've been doing, have you ever had any problems on the street asking for portraits? Have you, or are you basically, that's probably an unfair question actually, because I can imagine that if you were doing it candidly, then you do run yourself into a problem. But asking to take someone's portrait, have you had any problems with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer would be yes. Somaliland, where I went at the beginning of December, was a particularly tough location to take photographs because, and it was predominantly street photography. Yeah, it was. It's a very fairly staunchly traditionally Islamic country. Yep, a lot of problems up until recently. It's a country which is only recognized by Djibouti and Ethiopia, even though it's an independent nation now detached from Somalia. But on the street, we were perceived as possibly being journalists. So the reaction was sometimes very negative. But I think you can counteract that by, being friendly and personable and with a little bit of humor.
as the Irish would say, with a bit of
The
humor.
Irish would say.
And obviously living in Ethiopia for the period of time that you were, obviously people were quite familiar with you walking the streets. So that wasn't really a major issue. I suppose if you're going into a country like Somalia for maybe a workshop for about a week or 2 weeks, then of course the unfamiliarity does cause the problem for you down the line.
Yeah, Ethiopia was particularly safe, and living there, I never had any issues on the streets. And if someone reacts in a way they don't want their photograph taken, that's fine.
Yeah.
If I think I can persuade them in a nice way, I'll certainly have a go at it.
Yeah.
And if not, I'll try and have a laugh with them anyway and move on.
Yeah. Let's talk about your landscape photography now. I'm assuming, obviously, with the long exposure images, you're using a tripod for those images in Iceland there.
Absolutely, yeah. Tripod all the time for the landscapes, unless it's one of those spontaneous moments where you jump out of the car and
grab it.
There's room to park.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I certainly would use a tripod.
And let's just mention it because I've got a tripod. I've got a Giotto's tripod, but it's nothing. What type of tripod do you use? And
I have a lovely Gitzo tripod with a lovely Arca Swiss ball. A really nice piece of equipment. And I really believe the tripod makes a huge difference. It gives you confidence in adverse weather, the type that's outside here at the moment. Is
this one of the would say a graphite type based tripod, or is it one which is more sturdy and it's the old metal type made?
No, it's a lovely carbon fiber tripod with nice flush screw-in legs that don't catch on anything and light enough to take anywhere in a main piece of luggage.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it.
When you were in Iceland with regards to your cameras, did you have any problems with the camera behavior with the cold weather or windy weather? Obviously, if you're taking photographs down by the sea, you've got to also take into consideration sea spray. That sort of. Did you have any problems of that nature?
Well, yes, in the sense that had to be very, very careful. One of the biggest hazards in Iceland is in some of the beaches when the wind blows, there's this very fine volcanic dust, and it gets into everything. And I really don't like that. Sea spray, I can handle. I'll wipe it off with a little microfiber cloth and have another go again. But the waves in Iceland are very dangerous, and they can surge up the beach. And I've watched people get knocked over. It's something to be taken very seriously. Now,
the 750 is water resistant, water repellent, whatever words they use these days.
Yeah, the 750 and 800 are both water resistant.
Oh, the 800 as well. Yeah.
Super cameras.
And that's the reason why you one of the main reasons you switched to those, or was it down to improved technology and the better megapixel range that those two cameras have?
I think the latter. I was going for new technology, the opportunity, flexibility, better ISO handling, and just the resolution is superb. And if you want to crop, you can crop in and you still have a nice large image.
Exactly right, because you got they're both full frame cameras. Was the 800 directly after having the D200? Or was there one in between?
I had a D300 in between. 300
in the mid. I went to a presentation when I was a Nikon fan. Well, I'm still a Nikon fan, to be honest with you. I love Nikon cameras. But I was Grays of Westminster. I don't know whether you know the shop in London. They are a specialist Nikon shop. Their basement is purely an Aladdin's cave of Nikon equipment, from the Nikon S rangefinder cameras right the way through to the last film cameras that they made. The lenses are just amazing lens arrangement they've got. And I was invited along to a presentation for the D3 and the D300 when they first came out. And I must be honest with you, when I saw this and they started talking about what these two cameras could achieve, I thought, well, they're just pushing the boundary more and more. It was amazing. And I think, if I'm correct, there was quite a number of Canon users that switched to the D3 and the D3S, which followed. Quite where that scenario stands now with regards to those bigger cameras, I'm not quite sure. What always been a Nikon user. Have you ever been tempted away from Nikon?
No. I think I've just stuck with Nikon, and I now have no regrets whatsoever because they're using Sony sensors, which are amazingly good.
Yeah.
Although I do have lots of friends like Chris who use the Canon Mark V, you know, and they're superb cameras. You know, I don't ever have any. You know, I might make a joke or two, you know.
Yeah, we always do, don't we? It depends which camp you've actually started off in. You always make a joke about the other side, but, you know, now the twain shall meet. But there are a number of photographers that just seem to switch from one camp to another for whatever option that has become available. I think the most infamous one, excuse me, the most infamous one that I've come across recently was Scott Kelby from America there, who's a good, well, he's better than good, sports photographer, and he was using Nikon's D4, D3S, D4, D4S, I think he even went to at one stage, but then was handed a Canon 1DX, and he switched immediately. He just said, "Boom, that's it." And I find it strange that people make these switches. And of course, it's not just the camera. Of course, it's the whole gear, isn't it? It's 5 or 6 lenses gone, and switch into the other. Have you ever been tempted by mirrorless camera at all?
Well, I tell you what I tend to do is I think I'll stick with my Nikon, but I think the future is probably going to herald the onset of mirrorless cameras and a lot of other things that are just in the pipeline. And each year the technology, the innovation seems to just really it's almost an exponential growth.
I think what we're seeing here at the moment is with the mirrorless cameras, because of the companies that are making these cameras are really pushing the innovations forward. So many new things coming on board with regards to their cameras, the 4K video with the Panasonics, and then of course you've got all the ND filters available with Olympus, and then of course Sony's fantastic sensor that uses, which, as you mentioned very quite rightly, is being used by many other manufacturers. But I think one of the things that's holding people back is the fact that is the lens stable, which unfortunately some of these cameras don't have. And now, okay, you've got the Micro Four Thirds market where they've got innumerous a number of lenses which they can switch to, effectively third-party lenses. But if you look at Sony, and I suppose if you look at Fuji as well, they haven't got the lens stable which Nikon has or Canon has. And Chris made a very good point, I think, last time I spoke. He sees no point in switching for the moment because no other manufacturer is making a 24mm tilt shift lens, which he could quite happily go on a workshop for his week, and that would be his camera and his lens.
And he used that lens almost all the time in Ethiopia. And I have to say, the results he gets from it are very impressive. And it was especially good in the street context because he didn't necessarily have to point the lens straight at the person.
No, exactly.
It was very clever. And almost tempted me in that direction. But he did argue the case that the Canon one is better than the Nikon one.
Well, he would do, wouldn't he?
But then he would. He would absolutely do that.
As long as he didn't start you on the old the Lightbox Terapixel camera, which was due to be released on April the 1st, 2010.
No.
This clear acrylic box which he had everyone going on, which made me laugh so much. What's your go-to camera then, Trevor? Say you're just about to go out with your friends and family, but you want to take a camera. What would be your go-to camera?
Well, I'd probably take the D750 with me.
Right.
It's very versatile. But to be perfectly honest, if it's friends and family and it's just, you know, a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Sad to say, the old iPhone.
The iPhone is enough, isn't it?
Yeah, will probably substitute.
Yeah, exactly. That'll do the trick. I want to talk about your workshops in a second, because you mentioned earlier on that you do your tutorials and workshops there, and you're going to be teaming up with Chris in Donegal later this year. But before we do that, what are your future plans down the line?
Whoa, that's an award-winning question. Well, I would love to see our workshops and tours in Donegal expand to reflect the quality of what we have here to offer photographers.
Mm-hmm.
Photographers really are not coming here in the numbers that they would, say, go to Iceland. Yet the scenery here is absolutely mind-blowing. We have cliff coastlines, beaches, the potential for slow exposure, old wrecks, ancient ruins, those wonderful emerald green fields, incredible landscapes. So I would love to see that expand through our little alternative visions enterprise. That's one thing. The 5-year plan is to take those workshops, because I love teaching, and tours to well-known international destinations. When I say well-known, I mean well-known by me.
Yeah.
Because that way I can take a group of people, small group of people, and have the confidence to show them a country with assurance. So places like Ethiopia, places like Namibia, Iceland, Madagascar, Costa Rica, just to name a few. So that's certainly one area I would like to develop. There's a little bit of me. I taught in an amazing school in Southeast Asia, which was called United World College. They had the most amazing philosophy. I would love to do, for no personal profit apart from the good to humanity, I would love to do some humanitarian photography for one of the big organizations, and, you know, do some refugee camp or type stuff.
Sort of like a photojournalistic type project, so to speak.
Yeah, I would love to do a little bit of that. That's just at the back of my mind. I'd like to get a little bit more published here and there. I'd love to work, you know, there's a little bit of me would love to do a few assignments for something like National Geographic.
I'm assuming now, sorry to interrupt you, I'm assuming now you've retired from teaching geography.
Well, I stopped teaching 3 years ago.
3 years, yeah.
Mainly because of aging parents, and I have 2 children living in England with their mum. So I wanted to spend more time closer to them, and also to fulfill another passion. Exactly.
You mentioned something there earlier on with regards to your photojournalism. I saw a presentation by Tom Stoddart. I don't know whether you're familiar with his work, which were at times shocking, I think is the politest way to put it. Could you as an individual handle that?
Do you know, I have seen a lot, Paul.
Hmm.
Um, Living in Asia for 13 years, traveling through Bangladesh,
All right.
across the Himalayas from Kazakhstan through Pakistan, all over land, you see some
Mm.
truly horrible sights in terms of humanity. And Ethiopia, fantastic country, but in some places the level of poverty
Mm.
is really well, it's eye-opening, and I do think a lot more of us
Yep.
should see it to understand just how much we have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I was very fortunate to visit Delhi about 3, 4 years ago with my wife. It was for business, and we stayed in a beautiful hotel, Taj Palace Hotel. Absolutely fantastic. Um, and then we took obviously I did the work. I'm in an exhibition business. I did the work. I built the stand, and we had a couple of free days. So one day was moving around Delhi itself and into the old town, and that's when you really truly see sites which you are totally not familiar with and not prepared for. Um, I came away, in actual fact, feeling a little bit angry, to be quite honest with you, that we live in such a comfortable part of the world. Um, Generally, I know there's some poverty in our islands, but generally we're in a comfortable part of the world, and yet there are so many people out there in such a terrible state of affairs, which it just doesn't seem right, does it?
Well, I truly have seen a lot of this, and it's something that does anger me in a way
Yeah.
because we have so many things that we complain about here,
Hmm.
and sometimes the media doesn't do the world the greatest of favors.
No,
Uh,
you're right.
and you only have to live in some of these countries for a while. I grew to love Ethiopia, and
Hmm.
part of that love is actually having an empathy for the people. And all the schools I worked in tried to do something as part of the school's education program
Hmm.
to try and address these issues of what is truly a huge divide, the majority world and the minority world. And we live in the minority world. And
Yeah.
I've always thought I would like to use my photography, and photography can be used really negatively.
Hmm.
And you can come back thinking, whoa, Ethiopia is one big famine. That's not the case. It should be
Yeah.
used to portray reality,
Mm.
and used well for positive, constructive improvements in people's lives. You've hit a soft spot with me.
Yeah, I hit a soft spot, and I can empathize with you exactly where you're coming from, because um, I lived in Kuwait for 3 months myself, and I saw some sites out there which a lot of people would think, well, that's a bit strange because it's quite a rich country. India, the biggest growing economy in the world, and yet you saw some sites there which, people washing in the mornings in the puddles of the road, all sorts of that nature, which really does bring it home to you. And like you just said, I was angry when I got home, because people just don't really appreciate how lucky we are where we live and what we have
Yeah, I
compared
mean,
to what others have go through.
it's absolutely true. And if
Mm.
I could be the USS Enterprise, beam
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 them all up.
beam some of the people here up and pop them down for a day
Yeah.
in Yemen or Ethiopia or India or Bangladesh, and just let them see what a
Exactly right.
privileged life they live.
Couldn't agree more with you. And I think really another thing which came across to me with the work with Tom Stoddard, which he was showing at the time, um, the photographers that do this type of work, obviously Salgado is an absolute classic, and Don McCurry, and I've forgotten the guy's name, the old war photographer from our country.
It's Don McCullen and
Don McCullen, yeah, Don McCullen. Those guys that produced that sort of work, and Cartier-Bresson did some as well in his day. They, I don't think, really now get the opportunity to bring this photography to light as much as they used to when the magazine was as strong as the magazine were in those days.
Except, I do think, I mean, one of my favorite photographers is Sebastian Salgado, the Brazilian, and he would be my photographer.
Yeah.
Just superb, and I've been to 2 of his exhibitions, and they blew me away.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with you on that. He's a fantastic photographer. I watched his presentation once on TED Talks, and I didn't realize, in actual fact, he nearly drove himself into the grave with his work because of the way the photography that he was taking, putting him in a depressive state. He was very unwell through his photography. He had to take a back step away from photography to get better, and then started taking photographs again. Superb photographer.
I know he is a superb photographer, and I went to see one of his exhibitions recently in Milan.
Yeah.
And I queued for 2 hours. I'd already seen it in London, but I wanted to go back again.
Mm-hmm.
The second time you go, you see what you didn't see the first time.
Yeah, that's true. You do. Yeah.
And one of the most amazing things for me was that there was a photograph there of a girl taken in the Omo Valley of Ethiopia. And I stood and looked at it for ages.
Mm-hmm.
I got out my iPhone and I looked at because I have all my photographs on my iPhone, and I had taken the same girl.
No.
Which just completely knocked me off my feet, in the tribal areas, the remote area of Ethiopia.
Amazing.
And I just love the way he connected the world's wild places with the world's, if you like, remaining indigenous people. And through this Genesis project.
That's
and just seeing this really, really just, I mean, I got so excited I had to say to the person next to me, I've taken a photo of the same photograph. Well, not the same photograph, but the same person. Yeah, it's incredible.
Incredible. So, actual fact, you've done a neat little segue there. I'm assuming that Sebastian Salgado is your favorite photographer.
Yes, yeah. I just love the way he brings what we were talking about earlier, humanity,
mm-hmm.
At all levels to the surface, and makes what life is like in some of these countries, Brazil or Africa, truly tangible. You actually can feel through his photography the passion behind the lens. And that's something that I just strive for. I want my photography to be passionate photography. And I want heroes to look at. I mean, Steve McCurry is another one. I love his photographs. They're mind-blowing. But Sebastian Salgado, he's done it totally in monochrome.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful.
I think another thing from my point of view with regards to individuals that you've mentioned there, Don McCullen, Steve McCurry, Sebastian Salgado, Mary Ellen Mark as well, is their dedication to a given project. There are many photographers out there, I'm sure, that would say, I'm going to do a project on a given subject and probably would give up after about 2 or 3 weeks maybe. But when you look at these guys that have done that sort of work, and also the majority of the guys from the Magnum group themselves, that their dedication to photography to get the reportage over of a particular issue or subject matter is, to me, is what really counts.
I couldn't agree more. And I think a project which has behind it the skill of the photographer, but it's, for me, photography with meaning that actually has a use beyond the aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mentioned earlier on about the loss of the magazines where these guys used to sort of get their work out on a more regular basis. They're basically gone now. Um, I suppose there's one or two magazines floating around that they would still be able to get their work published, but certainly not in the way that the magazines like Time Life used to be able to do produce their work for them. And what's the other one? National Geographic, I suppose, to a certain extent, would be one which they would be aim for now. But I don't think their projects as such would really get over to people if they were just still available on the internet.
Yeah, you're probably right there, actually, because I've done some work recently, and I put it on. There's an Africa Geographic site, and one of the editors spotted it and asked if they could use X photographs for a small exposition, if you like, on Ethiopia. And I just thought, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that might be a situation where they would put it into a magazine.
Yeah.
But everyone's got a tablet, everybody's got a computer, so they've realized that online is the way to go.
It is, yeah. It's a shame in actual fact, because I think that those photographers and potential photographers who want to follow a photojournalistic career are in actual fact losing out now. I think the infamous story of the Chicago Times, where they sacked all their photographers and told the reporters to go around with iPhones, was quite an indication of the way things are going to go.
Well, that's scary.
But I think since then, and don't quote me on this, but I think since then the Chicago Times has re-employed some photographers because they realised they were missing out on a few skills. To say
and
there
are differences in
exactly
quality.
Right. Exactly right. You just can't just take a photograph on an iPhone and that'll do.
No, absolutely.
So we talked about your future projects and talked about your favorite photographer there. Who's your inspiration?
Well, probably I would have to say Salgado again, but I do love Steve McCurry. I love Steve McCurry because, I mean, a lot of his images are in color, but his portraits and the contexts in which he takes them. I'm not a go on holiday to the very popular resort. I'd much rather be immersed in a context where I can take photographs and almost selfishly be the only one around. Steve McCurry seems to get images from places that maybe even I wouldn't dare go near.
You're exactly right.
And I have to admire that, and I love that sort of focus on, again, it's the humanity. Salgado, McCurry, all of those guys, they take the most amazing images, but they're contextual. And sometimes I think, when someone looks at that little photograph or that photograph of the Somali girl, that was really quite an interesting place to go, because in 10 days we didn't see one tourist, not one. A few aid workers. And I think that's the sort of place, if I knew it was safe, it's great to take photographs.
Yeah. I think when you're talking about Steve McCurry there, with the time that he spent with the Mujahideen in the mountains in Afghanistan, you think about that now and you think, crikey, Don McCullen in Vietnam and the other guys that followed the soldiers over in the Vietnam War, not to mention, of course, those that followed around in the Second World War, Kappa and those sort of guys that were doing this. It is the type of work which I think, in a roundabout way, every photographer thinks, yeah, I think I'd like to have a crack at that, but then stop and think, there's a lot of danger there. There's a lot of danger which I don't think, personally, I wouldn't be able to handle. I'm pretty certain I wouldn't.
Well, I mean, I think the developmental type stuff I can do, but war zones or zones of conflict. My eldest daughter, Dani, she's a very keen photographer, and she has truly natural eye for taking a photograph. I can see her sometimes leaning towards photojournalism in places which are a little bit off the beaten track.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Fantastic. I've really enjoyed talking to you, Trevor. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
And I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, that's great.
As I say, you know, I mean, it's our little, we call our little enterprise Alternative Visions. And I think it has a good name because that's what I really want to achieve, an alternative vision.
Yeah, and alternative visions, exactly. I'm going to put all the links to your websites, Alternative Visions, Cole Images, 500px, Facebook, Twitter. I'll put that all in the blog, which I'll be doing over the weekend. So I'll be doing that rather than getting you to list them all out, because people won't have pen and paper while they're listening or watching this program.
No, absolutely.
And for those that we've had quite a number of live viewers today, so thank you very much for joining us, which is a real treat for me. I really appreciate that. If you've missed any part of the program, of course, this will be available on YouTube very shortly, probably in around about 5 to 10 minutes before it to upload. And then at a later date, I'm in the process of bringing everything to iTunes. So those that are driving in their car or going to work in the train or just working in the office and not allowed to have a screen on, they can listen to it as well. But that'll be some time, because I've got quite a bit of catch up to do, over 40 odd shows to load up, but we'll do that. I haven't told Trevor about my final line to finish the program. It's because, unlike Trevor, I'm a one camera, one lens person. So when I go out, leave your camera bag at home. All the best to everyone. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.